Today, we're going to dive into this little gem of a tool. This is a Stanley block plane. That's about all we know about it at this moment. It's rusty, crusty, dirty, and dusty. And although it's seen better days, these old tools were built to last, and I'm pretty sure that with a little bit of elbow grease and some TLC, we can bring this thing back to life. We're not going to be jumping into a museum quality restoration. That's just not how I like my tools to be. I want them to have that used patina, but everything needs to function properly. That's what we're going to do this time around. We're going to get it cleaned up, sharpened up, smoothed out, and hopefully we can uncover some clues and figure out exactly what model this is. Maybe you've got an old plane sitting around and you've wondered yourself what it takes to get one going again. This episode's for you, because that's exactly what we're going to do this time around. I'm Jeff, you're watching Home Built Workshop. Let's get started. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Home Built Workshop. I hope all of you are doing awesome today. Block plane. I think everybody's probably familiar with these. They're very common, really just used for a lot of general tasks around the shop. I've got several different ones myself, but this one is a recent addition that my friend Jim picked up at an estate sale. This thing has clearly been sitting for quite some time. If we take a look at this little guy, you can see that there is what looks like layers of dust. Maybe it's paint overspray, I'm not really sure, but it is caked on there really well. At first glance, without any cleaning, I don't see really any identifying marks, but I did spot one thing which tells me that at least it's a Stanley. Right on the back of this lateral adjustment, I believe that is, I can see what looks to be Stanley stamped in there. Now I believe this lever is bent. I'm not even sure what this upper lever is. The thing I like about this, and hopefully it'll help us figure out exactly what we're working with here, is this depth adjustment. It's just different than what I'm familiar with. I've got several Stanley block planes, and pretty much all of the ones I have this sort of adjustment knob at the back. The fact that this one is different is just cool to me. I don't know if this is a newer version, an older version, I just don't know. But hopefully, as we start cleaning this up, we can find some maybe casting marks or something in there that'll help us figure out what this is. So all I really know about this thing is that it is a Stanley. I don't know how old, I don't know exactly what model. I've got a couple ideas, but I really don't know until we get this taken apart, cleaned up, and hopefully, I think this is an adjustable mouth as well. We can get that freed up as well. So I'm going to start off by trying to get this lever cap off of here. The only thing I see is that it has a screw here. I don't know if we can get this loose. That really seems stuck on there. I don't want to damage anything. I'm going to give that a little shot at some WD-40. Really try to get this loose carefully. Yeah, that really is stuck in there. I'm going to use the screwdriver in the slot and just carefully tap it with a hammer. Hopefully we can maybe shock that screw a little bit and help break it loose. Not hitting it really hard, but I do kind of just want to try to jar it, get it busted loose. Switch to a little bit bigger screwdriver. Oh, it moved. It moved. I'm going to carefully work some more WD down in there. Again, I wanted to get this apart. We can't break this screw. I think we're past the danger of breaking it. At least it feels like it. It is still gritty, that's for sure. Well, we got it out far enough we can get this apart. I'm going to put a little WD up here on this front knob as well. I cannot loosen that knob by hand. I don't want to just grab it with pliers, so I'm going to wrap a scrap of leather around there. Hopefully, that'll protect it. And oh, that wasn't bad. I was going to say, hopefully we can loosen that up. I want to get everything loose first before we try to remove this rust. That is definitely a brass knob. As of yet, still no stamping numbers, but we haven't really cleaned it yet. Now I want to focus on trying to get some of this rust and grime off there. There's a lot of different ways you could do this, and really, as far as I'm concerned, not one is right or wrong. Nothing beats some good old WD-40 and some steel wool. In fact, we'll probably resort to that at some point. To start out this time, I'm going to use some regular distilled white vinegar. This is something that I've seen done before, but I personally have not tried it. So I'm just going to throw these parts in an empty coffee can here. We're going to douse it down with some vinegar and let it soak for a little while and see what happens. Smells like a jar of pickles in here. Just going to let that soak for a bit and just see if anything happens. Well, I've let these parts soak in here so far about 3 or 4 hours, and really, other than the whole place smelling like a barrel of pickles, I don't see a whole lot of difference. There is some dirt and grime in there, but I don't know. Maybe you need to let it sit longer, but I want to get going on this. So I think I'm just going to grab a wire brush, Scotch-Brite pads, whatever I can find. We're just going to start cleaning this up. I think we're just going to resort to methods that I've used in the past that I know for a fact work, and that's called elbow grease. Those of you that have used vinegar for cleaning rust before, let me know. Are you supposed to let it sit for like days and days? I don't know. I'm not too impressed. But maybe it did soften up some of it. We won't know till we actually start scrubbing. To clean up these parts, I'm using a combination of some 4/0 steel wool, a soft, bristled brass wire brush, as well as some different grits of Scotch-Brite pads. The Scotch-Brite pads probably do the least amount of work, and the steel wool does a great job of stuff that's not really stuck on there. The brass brush will get the more stubborn stuff off without scratching the metal. Well, I've been scrubbing and cleaning and scrubbing and cleaning, and yet I've not found the model number just yet. I was able to locate some patent numbers on the lateral adjustment lever. Hopefully that'll help us kind of narrow things down. And I've also found on the iron, it's a little bit hard to read, some numbers as well. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of digging around, try to figure out what these are. I really want to figure out exactly what model block plane this is. Looking online, I found there's about 100 different versions, different models, different variants within those models, some having one style of lever cap during these years and a different style in a different year. It's really hard to decipher, so I'm really hoping I can find a model number on here. I'm going to keep scrubbing a little bit longer in hopes that I can find some sort of a stamping or something like that. I definitely don't see a casting in there, so I feel like there's going to be a stamping in the body or something. At least I'm hoping. One method that I use quite a lot, and you can see me using it here, is using WD-40 along with some higher grit wet dry sandpaper. I'm using some 600 grit wet dry sandpaper right now, and I'm using the WD-40 as the lubricant for that sandpaper. 600 grit I find is high enough grit that it doesn't really remove any metal, but it does do a great job at removing rust. And as long as you don't sand too much, you still get that awesome patina that a tool like this deserves to wear. I use this method for almost all of the bare metal surfaces. I'll sand the iron, the bottom, the sides of the plane, basically anything that doesn't have a coating on it. So after a ton of scrubbing and cleaning and more scrubbing and more cleaning and inspecting things with magnifying glasses, trying to determine what this is, I think I got it narrowed down. Keep in mind that my determination of this hand plane is based really only on some facts that I have in front of me and a whole lot of research done online. So I sort of take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but I feel pretty comfortable that we're at least pretty close here. I believe what this plane is a number 9.5 block plane made by Stanley, and I believe this is what they call the Excelsior sides. The sides are shaped a little bit different. If we compare to this guy here, this is a number 65. And yes, the plane is a little bit different, but you can see on our number 9.5, this little swell here is farther back compared to this one. So I believe that is what they consider the Excelsior sides. This was a little bit tricky to nail down an exact date because the span that they made these 9.5s was over 100 years. Started in 1873 and ran until 1981. That's a long time to be making one model of plane. Of course, there was a million different variations, different changes along the way, but here's a few of the key ones that I found that helped me date this to around 1890. So if we take a look at our parts here, one of the things that I noticed is that on this adjustable mouthpiece, the later models had a little lever here that would slide this in and out. And if we go back to this number 65, you can see such a lever right there. This also has an adjustable mouth, very similar to this. This one does not have that little adjustment lever, nor does it have a hole where that lever would have been attached. Now that adjustment lever was added in the late 1890s. After that, all of these planes had that adjustment lever. So right away, that dates this to before the late 1890s. To help me narrow this down more, I had to look to the lever cap. Now this one has a locking lever. This is on a little cam mechanism. So the way this gets put into place is it's unlocked over here. You would slip that down over the pin and then you would clip that back. That puts tension on it, holds everything in place. From what I'm finding online, in the late 1890s as well, this cam lever was moved to the top. And quite honestly, most of the pictures I can find have that cam lever on the top. In fact, here's a very dusty 220 with the cam lever on the top. So the fact that this is still underneath the lever cap, again, tells us that this is pre-1890s, at least the later 1890s. Another clue is looking at the lateral adjustment lever. You can see the weird shape and the fact that it has to swing out here to make room so you can still move it around. Well, this lateral adjustment lever was added in the early 1880s. Before that, it was a completely different style, or maybe it didn't even exist. So we already know, based on the fact that it has this, that it is after the early 1880s, but the fact that it has this style locking lever means it's before the 1890s. One other major clue comes out in the stamping that I was able to find that's on the top of the iron. I'll put a picture up here because it's hard to get the video to focus on that. This stamping is apparently what they call an A4 trademark stamp. Now what I found online was that it's used from 1879 to 1885. Again, keep in mind that it is hard to find exact dates, but that puts this somewhere around the 1895 mark. But the final clue that I think dates this very close to that 1890 are the fact that there's 4 patent dates on this lateral adjustment lever. We have patent 2876, 102184, 11788, and 72488. These were the first markings that I found other than Stanley marked on the back, and when I first saw it, I thought maybe it meant 1988. I didn't really suspect that it was as old as 1888, but come to find out, they didn't make these in 1988. They stopped in 81. So, after researching these specific dates, it's 1888 is the latest date, July of 1888. So that tells me that if they had the patent in 88, this is probably an 89, maybe a 1890 model. I'm guessing anyway. That's just sort of an assumption after reading all of the other information. But that's what I'm going with. I'm going to go with 1890 Stanley number 9.5 block plane. Pretty cool stuff. One of the things I love the most about this process is exactly what we just did. Spend some time cleaning up the parts, trying to find markings, numbers, patent dates, all that sort of stuff, and then doing the research to determine a rough age. In the case of this 9.5 plane, about 135 years old. That is super cool. I don't consider myself an expert on any part of this process. All of what I just explained, I found online by just reading forums and articles and all that sort of thing. But I'd like to throw it out to all of you. If you're familiar with this particular plane or any of these planes, and I got a piece of information wrong, maybe I missed something, maybe you know a little more about it, please leave it down in the comments. I'd love to learn some information from all of you because, like I said, I'm not an expert. I don't know all of it, and I would love to know more about this particular plane. And maybe you happen to find some information that helps pinpoint the date even more so. I still believe that we are somewhere in that 1888 to 1891, 2, 3, somewhere in there. But I'd love to hear from all of you if you have some more information. Now that we have an idea of roughly how old this is, I think we can carry on with getting this thing reassembled, tuned up, sharpened up, even though this blade actually doesn't feel all that bad. It's not going to take a lot of work to bring back to life. Really kind of impressed, which tells me that throughout this life, I'm guessing somebody used this thing. Someone took good care of it. I definitely, by the feel of the blade, do not believe that it's been sitting for 30, 40, 50, 80 years. I don't know. It's just got too much of an edge. Let's get this back together. One other thing I want to point out really quick is the fact that this 9.5 does not have the handy grip. What the heck is a handy grip? Well, if we look at this 65, you can see this little indent here, and that, just to help give you something to hang on to. It's my understanding that it was not on the 9.5 until 1895, and then from there it was on all of them until they were done. That's what I read online. So this is another clue that tells us that this was made before 1895. I've got just a little bit of oil here in this little cup, and I'm going to put a little bit on the mechanism here for the sliding mouth. Just a thin layer. Where it meets the inside of the plane. Also just a tiny bit on the inside of this brass knob. Remember, we don't have to worry about the little adjustment cam because we don't have that. It's just that brass knob that holds everything in place. The way I read it is it used to have originally just like a flathead screw here. Well, then they added the knob, and then from there it changed to the little adjustment cam. Now we'll put our lateral adjuster back in place. Again, I'm just going to wipe it down with just a little bit of oil on the threads. A little bit on the boss here. I'm not trying to soak it down or anything like that. I just want a little bit of oil in there to kind of help protect things. That's going to go right back in. Am I going to try to tighten that down yet? I need to bend this part of the lever out just a little. See how it's bent in there? I'm guessing probably what happened is maybe somebody dropped it and it landed on the end, bent that in. I'm just going to carefully bend that out just a little bit. I don't want to go too much, but I need to get it enough room so that it clears that adjustment knob. A little bit more. I think that'll work. These planes are what we call a bevel up plane, meaning the bevel on the iron faces up. You may have heard bevel up, bevel down, and you really can't change that around because on the back of this iron are little serrations, and those serrations are what fit in the little tab here for the height adjustment. So you have to run it bevel up. That's not a bad thing. I'm going to put that iron in place. Just make sure everything goes back together. Now we'll take our cam lever, which again was changed from this position to the top in the mid-1890s. We need to make sure that's moved off to the side, and then we can take a screwdriver and snug this down. Not a lot. We still got to have room to get our lever cap on and off. We can still get our lever cap in and out. A little bit more. And now you can see that if you sling this back to the center, locks the iron in place, we can now move our lateral adjusting lever and we can get to our depth adjuster. With our plane reassembled, don't worry, we're not done. The next thing I want to do is take a nice flat straight edge and I'm holding it across the sole. I want to make sure that the bottom is nice and flat. And actually, it's a lot flatter than I anticipated, but I think just a little bit of adjusting, some fine tuning on there, I think is going to be a good thing. I'm going to break out my nice flat piece of plate steel. I've got a piece of 600 grit sandpaper, and while the blade is in place and everything's locked down, I'm going to lightly flatten this bottom. If it was really bad, I would drop down to something much coarser, but I think 600, I could probably even get away with 800 just to do a little bit of flattening. Again, it's important that the blade and everything is in place because you want all of the tension on the plane that's going to be on there when you're using it. If you flatten it without the lever cap and things in place, there's a good chance that it's not going to be flat once you get that tension in there. So with everything in place, now we're just going to carefully flatten that bottom. I'm trying to hold it in exactly the same orientation you would when you're using the plane. I'm not pressing hard. After just a minute, you can see we've shined it up right here, kind of this V shape, and a little bit up here. So it looks like we've got just a little bit of a hollow right there, but I don't think it's much. And there, if you look at the bottom, not the whole entire thing is shined up, but the majority of it is, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I just want to remove as little material as possible, but still know that I've got a reasonably flat sole, and I think that's going to be just fine. With the sole flattened and cleaned up, now we can move on to getting this iron sharpened. Pull the lever cap back off of there, remove our iron. Whenever I'm sharpening chisels, plane irons, that sort of thing, I almost exclusively use a honing guide. There's a ton of different ways that you can sharpen things, but a honing guide I found for me is quick and easy. They're not very expensive, and I just use a sandpaper system working up through the grits using the honing guide. It's really a pretty cost-effective system for sharpening, I think. You can get as complicated as you want with your sharpening. Use what method you like and what works for you. But for me, it's a honing guide, sandpaper, and a flat surface, which in my case is this Blanchard ground steel plate. You could use a piece of glass, whatever it is, nice and flat. It'll work fine. To set up my irons, I use this little jig. It's got different blocks of wood in here that act as a stop block. That way, I can just slide the iron up to this block and I'm going to get a 25-degree angle. Alternatively, I suppose you could use an angle finder. Just adjust it until you're at your desired angle. There you go, 25. Before I get too far in and really get rolling with the sharpening, I'm going to do a couple of quick pulls here just to look at my bevel. What I'm looking for is to see if where I've started to sand is too far back, too far ahead. Maybe it's only on the very edge of the iron. The fact that it's right in the middle tells me that I'm probably in a good spot being at 25 degrees. I don't know what this was at before, but I'm not way off either way. And 25-degree angle is going to be perfectly fine. This might be one of the easiest plane blades to kind of revive. A lot of times they've been neglected for decades. Nicks, chips, who knows what. Like I said earlier, this one actually feels a little bit sharp. The angles aren't all messed up. There's not any big nicks that I can see. It's really not going to take that long. Since I'm using a steel plate to do my sharpening on, it makes it really convenient to just use magnets to hold the sandpaper in place. I'm just going to continue swapping out my sandpaper as I work up through the grits. I usually stop my sharpening at 2000 grit. A lot of people go a lot higher than that, and that's totally fine. But for me, I found that stopping at 2000 works just fine. I always follow up a sharpening with just a few passes on a leather strop. Looking at this iron, it really sharpened up nice. It's got a beautiful mirror finish on there. You can see that reflection glisten in there. Really cleaned up nice. Again, I think this is the easiest plane iron from an old plane that I've sharpened. Came out really good. Just put this plane back together. I can see there's a little different shine on the blade on this side than there is on that side because the blade is skewed just a little. So we can use our lateral adjustment to account for that. We'll be able to tell more once we make a cut, which I think we're ready to do right now. We'll start out with just a little scrap here. This is a scrap of elm. All right, we'll just start out here. The blade is just making contact. So we'll turn our thumb wheel just a little bit. That's a little bit of free play right there. The blade's starting to move right now. That's a little better. Really a fine shaving. We can go just a little more. There we go. Pretty much a full width shaving right there. Very cool. Let's try something different. I got a scrap of mahogany. Might be sapelli. Let's try that. A little bit wider. Okay. Tiny bit more. Wispy, thin shavings. Very cool. Nice and smooth. Let's turn it on its side. It's a little bit wider surface. Maybe we'll mimic, I don't know, flattening a headstock on an acoustic guitar or something along those lines. Ooh, that cut's nice. There's something to be said about a freshly planed surface of wood. You could sand all day long, but when you plane it or scrape it, it does have a different look. I really should try to do that more often. Just a cool glisten to it. What a cool plane. So that's going to wrap up a revival of what I believe to be our Stanley number 9.5 plane, circa 1890. What a cool plane. Huge shout out to my buddy Jim for hooking me up with this. This thing is going to be awesome. I'm really glad to have this in my little growing collection of hand planes. Again, if you have any information that might help me get a better date other than my 1890, maybe there's something I missed, leave it down in the comments. Help me out. Help me figure out what this is. And also let me know your thoughts in general on these old planes. My personal opinion, is they're so much better than the new planes, and you can pick them up all over the place in usable condition, just like this one was. And really, in an afternoon's work, you can get it cleaned up, sharpened, and get the thing brought back to life. What an awesome project. It's gonna look great on the shelf. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. I'm gonna go plane some more pieces of wood now, just for fun. We'll see you next time. I bet they didn't really think that I was actually gonna just come over here and plane some more wood. They probably thought I was just saying that at the end of the video. This thing is so cool. We've got to redo this. Not right now, I'm busy planing though.